There are several people who are signed up for public speak out, but I believe that only 2 of them are in attendance. And so we'll begin with Damian Phillips.
Still, it's worth it. You may not get back there.
I'm good.
You have 3 minutes to address the council. Please state your name and address for the record.
Anthony, he got stuff to hand out. Save on his 3 minutes.
Well, as soon as they get them. My name is Damian Phillips. I have purchased a Victorian up on Dartmouth Terrace in Springfield. What's concerning to me is the shape of what shape the city is in. And I've come from an outside area, and I've seen several different cities and the functionings of inner cities, and they're nothing like this. I've seen a lot of neglect in the city. We have a lot of good people that work in the city, and the city right now is damaged, but it is fixable. And there's a couple things. I just handed out some packets. The main address that I'm here for is the safety of the snowplows this winter. They fall under Department of Transportation guidelines. Therefore, they fall under the laws, state and federal, for heavy truck operators, which should be maintaining DOT logbooks. So in that, they're also subject to drug tests. The municipality plow drivers are not, they are exempt. However, according to the state police in Cambridge, Massachusetts, who run this heavy truck department, municipalities are exempt. The outside contractors are not exempt. They cannot do any longer than 11 hours behind the wheel while they're plowing. After the 11th hour, it's against the law, and they're supposed to be off the road. Now, that being said, if there is a state of emergency for a snowfall, those rules are all null and void. However, within the city of Springfield, we have a lot of people who like to disobey the parking bans, and they all have reason that they don't have a place to park, or they're just simply very lazy to get out and move their cars. So my idea was talking to the Springfield Parking Authority, which I already made a couple phone calls to open up a parking garage downtown Springfield. I'll be making a couple phone calls to the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority to see if we can run a couple extra bus lines to transport people back and forth to the parking garage, where they can park 1 or 2 days in a parking garage free of charge. But after the couple days is over, the cars need to be removed from the garage. That would greatly help the downtown residents. The other problem is the people who totally disregard this and disobey this create problems with plowing in the city. And after they move their car, they leave a mess for the rest of us to deal with. So my suggestion was, if we can open up these parking lots, if we can supply their transportation, if they do neglect to do this, their cars should be towed, not ticketed, towed immediately. Their car will only get towed once, they will learn the lesson, and they will never do it again. The packet that I handed out is for some prior council meetings that should be coming up that I'm going to try to put on the agenda. This is just a whole bunch of different subjects that I informed Mr. Twiggs would be coming up, or I would like them to come up. And this goes from heavy trucks going down St. James Avenue, the traffic flow, elevated crosswalks, bike paths, enforcement of the 18-wheelers that are 80,000 pounds that constantly run down the road that are doing damage to the infrastructure underneath St. James Avenue between 291 and State Street. The city is aware of this. The city knows that those sewage lines are made out of counterpoint pressure brick. It's only a matter of time before they collapse with the weight of these trucks. Our houses are being damaged. There is an article that is in the pamphlet that was done by, what's his name? Greg Gagnon. It was done, I think, in 1987. In 1987, he approached the council with a petition of 211 signatures of people from the neighborhood. Since then, to my knowledge, nothing has been done to correct the traffic problem or the flow of traffic or the speed of traffic within the city, in our section of the city. McKnight is the smallest of 17 sections, supposedly, and I think this would be an opportune area to start to institute some of these new practices, some elevated crosswalks, some bike trails, make a truck route that is designated to Albany Street. There is also a leaflet in here from the city of Springfield saying that that is the only option and that is what should be done. So I would be asking the board to talk to the engineering department to see if that truck route can be done with a little altercation on, I think it's Armory Street and Albany Street, with a little bit of a change of the stoplights down there and have those lights set back a little more. There is no reason why the 18-wheelers cannot be detoured down Albany Street, away from the residential neighborhoods, away from the National Historic District that we live in, and be put out of the way and keep them in industrial areas instead of residential neighborhoods. These trucks are traveling down the street at speeds that they cannot stop at. If there's a child that runs out in the street, if there's an elderly person whose wheelchair happens to go out in the street or falls getting out of their car, these trucks cannot stop. They are not going at a reasonable speed. And the other big factor is we have a train trestle bridge up by Albany Street on St. James Avenue that is built for 29 tons. These trucks are 80,000 pounds, which exceed the weight of that bridge by 20,000 pounds. That's why for everybody who goes over that bridge and they keep seeing it being broken up, this is the reason why. The trucks are overweight. Even our own trash trucks full have been weighed and they're overweight going back over that bridge. They need to be rerouted to Bay Street and to Tapley Street to be emptied. Basically, I think I'm way over my 3 minutes, but.
So I have a letter here in response to your concern from the DPW dated July 28th, which says that in an effort to address your concern, and this is from City Engineer Matthew Sokup.
Correct.
In an effort to address your concern, I have asked Hector Velez and the city's traffic engineer to install additional advanced warning signs. Has that happened?
Those have happened. Trucks have ignored them.
Trucks have
Ignored them totally. We have no stores in McKnight to speak of. We have no reason for a semi to be coming into our neighborhood unless it's moving somebody in or moving out, in which the big trucks that are coming in to move people are moving them out because they're leaving.
And so if I'm understanding you correctly, the DPW has been responsive. However, the issue now is enforcement. Is that correct?
The enforcement is making a designated truck route down Albany Street and keeping the trucks out of the McKnight neighborhood. The damage to the houses are, I can't even begin. The vibration from the trucks coming down the road, they're shaking the houses. Part of my living room ceiling fell in. I have one of the most, what would you call it? Landmark houses there. And part of my ceiling fell in a couple weeks ago. The guy across the street, part of his ceiling is crumbling again. I mean, there's only so many times we can have things replastered, fixed, and then our foundations are shaking. And when you have a truck outside your window that's powering up to go up the street, it's not a pleasant thing to listen to at 3 o'clock in the morning and or 4 o'clock. It's also not pleasant to listen to fire trucks coming through the neighborhood at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning with their sirens blaring, but they do. Those need to be rerouted as well. The speed of the traffic that comes through the neighborhood is to the point of ridiculous. The accidents that happen are ridiculous. I showed Mr. Twig some pictures. Can I have those pictures, Dave? This is a minor accident. This is Clarence Street and Worthington Street. You want to pass that around? One car hit another car.
You'll have to speak into the microphone.
I have the police report at my house. I just didn't remember to bring it. One car hit another car and pushed the first car into that house. That is on Clarendon Street. That is a very hard house to hit, especially in that direction. This picture is directly in front of my house. There is a car, when you notice this picture, shoved underneath another car, which is up against that historic lamppost that's in the middle of the street that really isn't historic, but the concrete is historic. So that's the only historic thing we got. This one happened 1 week after a car went down Worthington Street, just about around Ingersoll in Worthington, and took down a pole. This happened 1 week after. This is a truck. that went off the road, and there could have been a kid there because this is right next to an apartment building on Worthington Street. The truck went off the road, ended up in somebody's hedges. This is the other car that was involved in the picture, and this really needs to be like in an advertisement for die-hard batteries because it's one of the only things that survived the accident. So I'll pass these around. This is not a 20-mile-an-hour.
So I'm trying to just kind of narrow down what your request is.
My request first, designated truck route down Albany Street. Second request, elevated crosswalks, Worthington Street and St. James Avenue. Third request, speed restrictive devices placed throughout that area. Third request, or one of the other requests would be to make some streets one-way, make some other streets dead ends. So people cannot elude the police when they're trying to escape from a crime or a high-speed chase, which they do quite often through our neighborhood.
So have you requested to meet with either the DPW or the Traffic Commission on either of those issues?
Chris Signoli does not. Well, I did. I started off at the mayor's office, and I did talk to his aide, and he lied directly to me. He said speed bumps and speed restrictive devices are illegal. And then when I talked to Mr. Neal's office, when I talked to Congressman Neal's office, they didn't know. So they did some research, and they did get back to me. And ironically, his secretary in Springfield lives up the street on St. James Avenue. She is very much aware of our problems. So she did a little more investigating, and they're not illegal. Speed restrictive devices are in Amherst on Route 9, which is a major route. We have Northampton, Amherst. Where else we got them around here? They're all over the place. They're not illegal.
We have to move on because I have another speaker that signed up.
So we're looking for speed bumps.
Have you met with either the DPW or the Traffic Commission on these issues?
The response finally, when I got to the line, the total lack of honesty was, Chris Signoli does not like them. And that's as far as it went. And that's exactly what he said. Chris Signoli does not like them.
Speed bumps.
So we're not getting them. But Chris Signoli does not live in our neighborhood. I don't know.
The Traffic Commission, I mean, we can provide you with a schedule when they meet. That will probably be the best place to start. Your ward counselor can even arrange for you to meet with the Traffic Commission if you like. I mean, that would be, unless anyone else has other ideas.
I think we should have a public hearing within this office with the Traffic Bureau, so all the public that is reading about these meetings and people who are paying their taxes know what our taxes are going to. What our taxes are paying people that aren't doing their jobs effectively. And some people are. Some people need raises in the city, some people need to be replaced. It's that simple.
Well, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We can provide it with the information, like I said, to meet with the Traffic Commission, and I'm sure that your ward councilor will be.
So do you,
Councilor Walsh. That's true. Yep.
They meet the first Tuesday of every month at 10:15 at the Clodo Concepcion Center at Greenleaf, but January 8th is the next time they're meeting, and they will be able to give you some guidance on what can and cannot be done.
right.
Thank you, Councilor.
But then in '87, we had 211 signatures to do something. 211 signatures. People from our neighborhood signed this petition to do something with the traffic. So in 30 years, something couldn't have been done? Are you kidding me?
I would advise that if you have a copy of the petition, you can bring it to the Traffic
Yeah.
Commission. Okay, perfect.
They have it out of the newspaper article. The newspaper
thank
is
you.
very aware of it.
The next speaker is David Gabby.
You got to go that way.
Good evening. I'm Dave Gaby. I'm at 1105 Worthington Street, also in the McKnight section. And I'm come to speak to you today. We're on the eve of a very big year for Springfield. I think we all know how long it's been since something as big as the MGM casinos opened up. And I'm just here to speak about the need that I see that we should be upping our game because there's risks involved. I had a very scary visit with my daughter. She was a cheerleader in high school, and one of her events that she went to was a convention in Atlantic City. I had a chance to visit the casinos in Atlantic City, and I had a chance to, which were very nice. and I happened to see the rest of Atlantic City, which was very, very scary. It looked like all the money had been sucked right out of the town. It looked like they had never discovered the concept of paint in the entire city. So what I say that to say that we don't want to be like that. I think MGM, I've been working with MGM for a year and a half with their community partners network, and they're excellent people. They're really a quality organization, and they have good ideas about how to work in a city. And what I'd like to see, and I'd like to suggest that we should get a little bit more on our game, and I'm going to be working on this, it will be coming down, is that we should be working to bring, so that as MGM comes into the city and gets activated, our downtown and our neighborhoods are ready to accept people like the ones that you just spoke to, moving in from West Springfield and other places, so that we can hold the attention, that people want to come back again, that we can build on the casino activities so that Springfield could be more of the community that we wanted, and less, that doesn't become that kind of an Atlantic City type situation. I'm in particular thinking about the cultural, of building on the cultural heritage of what I call the Golden Age neighborhoods, which are like McKnight, Maple Street, Six Corners, Forest Park, the North End, the neighborhoods that were developed in Springfield's great surge of development in the 19th century. There's a great historic resource. We can build on that. We're not doing it. We are still, even with the City Council's new ordinance that was amended last year, we still have city officials trying to tear down historic buildings instead of repairing them. They're not going through the Historical Commission. They're working behind closed doors, but it's still happening. We should be going a different way. And we still have, I think, too much of an emphasis on low-income housing and not enough market rate housing coming along. So anyway, I just wanted to suggest that something that I hope we'll all work on in the coming year, and prepare people for the idea that I'll be bringing some ideas forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll get started with our regular meeting. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Councilor Evans. Present. Councilor Allen.
Present.
Present. Councilor Rowe. Present. Councilor Gomez.
Present.
Present. Councilor Walsh.
Present.
Present. Councilor Marcus Williams.
Present.
Present. Councilor Ash. Here. Councilor Twiggs. Present. Councilor Shea. Present. Councilor Fenton.
Present.
Present. Councilor Hurst. Absent. Councilor Bud Williams. Present. Councilor Ramos.
President, would everyone please rise and join me in a moment of silence? Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're also joined by Councilor-elect Jesse Letterman. Are there any reports of committee? Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'd like to give a couple reports on the Finance Committee. Tonight, the Finance Committee met at 5:30. In attendance were Councilor Fenton, Councilor Twiggs, and myself from the Finance Committee. Also, Councilor-elect Letterman was also in attendance. We went over the financial items from tonight's agenda, and I'll speak about a couple of them briefly, but we approved all the items on tonight's agenda. There is one change to the bills from the prior year. It's going to be a higher number than you see on your agenda, only $400 higher, but Lindsay, our budget director, just made me aware of that. The other items, which included item 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, were all approved by the Finance Committee. So that is the first report. We did talk briefly about free cash. Comptroller Pat Burns was there and informed us a little bit about free cash. Of course, any number that is passed around about free cash at this point is not a certain thing, but the number, he can speak to it when he comes up to give the budget report about the amount of free cash and the timing on getting free cash. So that's the extent of the first Finance Committee, the first report I want to give the Finance Committee that met for tonight's meeting. I do have another report to give, Mr. President. I don't know how you want to...
All in favor of accepting, is that an additional finance report?
Yes.
Can you continue?
Just doing both? Okay. The additional finance report is that at this time of the year, every year there is a special tax committee put together, and that group of people meets 2 or 3 times. I believe it's normally 3 times, and goes through financial information, new values, et.cetera., what the city needs to raise in additional tax revenue, that sort of thing. That committee is comprised of 5 people. The chairman of the Board of Assessors, Richard Allen, the head of the local chamber, which is Nancy Creed, an economist or financial analyst. I have Mark Howard, who's a professor of economics at Springfield College, and a citizen, and we have Wilfredo Lopez as our citizen. 4 of those 5, and myself, 4 of the 5 people were able to make our first meeting, which was last Wednesday, I believe, and was an introductory meeting getting us all on the same page as to what we need to do. It's the same group of people as last year, and I think one of the benefits is that people did it once and they'll have a little understanding of doing this process again. The way it's set up is there's supposed to be a public hearing so people can come and speak about city finances or tax rates or whatever. That is tomorrow. That's been set up for tomorrow at 3:30 at the Mason Square Library. Wish we could have had it a little bit later in the day, but to get everybody there and the schedules, et cetera, 3:30 was the best we can do. So we'll be at the Mason Square Library 3:30 to 4:30, maybe it'll be 5, and that's a chance for the public to come and speak. So tomorrow we'll have a deeper discussion about the actual numbers, if the city's values have been approved by DOR. That leads us to the third meeting, which will be Monday, this coming Monday at 3:30. And that will be here at City Hall, and that's when we will go over potential recommendations of what the new tax rate could be or should be, and we'll vote at that point. Those 5 people will vote. I do have an alternate person in case somebody can't make it on the citizen side. So hopefully we've got 5 people. Last year we had a 3-2 vote on what we recommended to the council. So out of that meeting Monday at 3:30, there will be a recommendation which will come forward to us at the council that evening at 6 o'clock. There's a special meeting to determine tax rate at 6 o'clock this coming Monday, an hour before the hearings meeting that night. And Treasurer Collector Lonergan is he's the person, once these get approved, he's responsible for getting the bills all squared away and mailed and all that. If they are not mailed by December 31st, we cannot have 2 quarterly tax bills. Then we have to have just 1 more tax bill, and it would be May 1st. So it would affect the timing of our revenue. So his deadline that he gave us in terms of to assure that everything is done is this coming Monday. So Monday, when we're here at 6 o'clock at that meeting, that's the job is to figure out what our tax rates are and get enough of us to vote for whatever the recommendation is, or an alternate recommendation. So that's so just want to give everybody a heads up on that. 3:30 Mason Square Library tomorrow, 3:30 City Hall Monday, 6 o'clock City Hall Monday. Thank you.
Council Williams?
Just on the report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, bring us up to date. So mostly all these meetings are in the early afternoon. These public meetings.
The 2 that and we were working on existing meetings and schedules.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, typically, I know a lot of residents work. Most of your taxpayers, they probably work, their own homes. I remember in the past, we've had evening meetings at Central High School. They have an evening meeting. You have a council would have the meeting, have a ton of people up here. I just want as much citizen participation as possible. I think 3:30 in the afternoon, and maybe you'll get a huge crowd. I don't know, but I don't think both meetings should be at 3:30. I think you need to have one meeting in the evening, so people who can work can come home, clean up, get a bite to eat, and then go to the meeting. 3:30, a lot of people are still working. That's just my take on that. That's really early for public meetings.
So if I could respond to that, I share your concern. We just couldn't make it happen earlier with schedules of existing council meetings and personal schedules of people who are on the committee. So that's why I said I stay there tomorrow till 5:30. I don't have there's no ending of the meeting at the other end. So I would just encourage the public to come tomorrow at any time they can if they want to give testimony on the tax rates. Their alternative times are Monday at 3:30. Which again is the same time, but also Monday at 6, they can come to our meeting, Monday at 6. There's 3 chances to give testimony, tomorrow at 3:30, Monday at 3:30, Monday at 6. I wish it could have been better or easier, but just existing schedules and stuff made it hard to do it.
Mr. Clerk, Counselor, one second. Mr. Clerk, is there anything preventing us from taking testimony at the 6 o'clock special meeting?
The 6 o'clock special meeting on the tax rate is a hearing. So you'll be taking testimony.
Okay. Counselor Williams.
I'm just trying to understand. So it's the committee that couldn't meet in the evening, or was it city meetings? I'm trying to understand what the conflicts were.
Yeah, there are existing meetings that took place on different personal schedules. For instance, myself, I had a couple meetings later in the evening, tomorrow night and Wednesday night. And, you know, so it was the best we could do in terms of people's availability. So the option, I'd be happy to take some testimony or email testimony or whatever, if that's legal. I'm happy to have people call me.
So this meeting is tomorrow night at 3:30 in Mason Square?
3:30.
It's been posted and duly noticed?
Yep.
Okay.
Been posted. Everything's been posted.
First I heard of it. No one's even talking about it, so maybe they don't know. But we'll try to get the word out for you. But
Well, I told Peter Goon and all that stuff today. It's a big story on Mass Live in the last.
But I do know, especially in Mason Square, the community I represent in Henry Twiggs, 11th Hamlet District, evening meetings are much better. Folks, people work, and they don't get out of work 4:30, 5 o'clock. That's all I'm saying. I mean, we're going to miss a
Totally
big
agree.
portion of people.
Thank you. So if evening is the key time, then Monday at 6 is the time people should come. We couldn't go late. We had an option of going Monday at 8 after our hearings night, but it seemed better to go Monday at 6. So if people want to go later, tell Mr. President, and maybe we could do it later that night, if that would be better. But that's how it stands, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any other reports of committee? Councilor Hurst.
Thank you. The General Government Committee met this evening. I was joined by Councilor Allen, as well as Councilor Fenton, Councilor Twiggs, and Councilor Gomez, and also Councilor-elect Letterman. Jesse Letterman was in attendance. The first issue we discussed was throwing snow and ice into the streets, which really deals with commercial properties. And the idea was that we would start to impose a fine, and Chris will go into it in a little further detail in a few moments, of $100, I believe $200 and $300 for the third offense, $200 for the second offense, and $100 for the first offense. And the issue and the problem that the DPW is having is that once they've already plowed the roads, you would have these independent contractors who are plowing the commercial businesses push the snow out into the middle of the street. And in essence, it would cause the DPW to have to, in turn, go and redo the streets that they had previously done. So the hope is that we'll prevent this from occurring. And again, Chris will talk more about that in a bit. In addition, we talked about the fee regarding the parking ban. And the general consensus, I think what was new for me was that there was always a $50 fee that was on the books that this body at some point in time had approved. And so we are not changing the $50 fee. There was a little ambiguity in terms of when that $50 fee could be applied. Again, Chris will go into details, but I think our police officers had a different version. At some point in time, they were giving a $15 fee, and then other times they would give a $50 fee when I believe it was a during a snowstorm and it was an emergency situation. So at this particular point in time, the General Government Committee agreed that we would impose a $50 fee regardless of whether the car was going to be towed or whether it was not going to be towed. And so we're not changing the fee. We're essentially just making sure that ourselves and the police department are on the same page with respect to enforcement of this particular fee at all times, as opposed to just when they're getting ready to tow a vehicle. And without objection, I'd love to take those two particular items out of order, if possible.
All right, if there's no objection, there's an objection on the floor. All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Councilor Allen.
If I could just say, the finance items are so quick tonight, I think it's better if we get through them first, and then, because that might have some discussion. Thank you.
Are there any other reports of committee? Councilor Edwards.
On this past Tuesday week, the RER, the Responsible Employee Ordinance Committee, met. We've been meeting consistently for actually approximately almost 8 years now, and I'm very proud of what we are about to unveil to you. TJ and Mr. Theo Lees, Lindsay, and my colleagues, Pat Sullivan, Tim Allen, the members of the committee, former committee member Bud Williams. Quite often in this chamber we talk about residency and how important it is. This committee has done its best that they could do under the circumstances over these past years to try to monitor all the hiring of minorities, women, and residents from all municipal construction. That's the senior center, the schools, and any type of construction that was city, not private construction. We've certainly, as a committee and as a council, has encouraged private investment and federal dollars to be spent wisely in those veins. But as many of you are aware, and I won't get into all of the details, you know that when the ordinance was established, parts of it were struck down by a lawsuit that was filed in Fall River, and it struck down portions related to apprenticeships and pensions and things of that nature. Very recently, I believe the last time I gave a report, which was more than some months ago, I made you aware that the UMass Boston and two professors there had agreed to do a study on residency so that we could withstand a legal challenge if we were to be taken to court in a lawsuit. I'm proud to pronounce that a draft of what we will be presenting to you should be before you within the first couple of weeks or within the first month of the new year. It addresses residency in a way that gives us very much significant confidence that we can enforce residency with all municipal construction contracts. And that being said, but we will have yeoman's work to do once it comes to you. You will be getting a draft copy from TJ very shortly with an outline of what we propose to do. It is a recognition in this document of the need for a compliance officer, and it will be spelled out in that document what the role of that officer will be. And it will also include, we have a buy-in from the mayor and his staff on the importance and what is actually necessary financially to actually implement this ordinance. I think you'll be quite surprised, but you will have an opportunity to vet it. And what I'm suggesting, as soon as you get your copy, those of you who have contracts, friends, or people who are related to those fields, please have a coffee with them, a beer or something other, and discuss it. Because we will have plenty of public comment and accepting public comment, but it's a living document that we're going to have to hash out the specific details of it. Our goal is not to make work within the city more expensive or more difficult for contractors, but what it is to try to get the dollars that are circulating through this robust economy here in the Commonwealth and particularly within Springfield, so that more of the people who are actually living and working and paying taxes in the city of Springfield are benefiting. And I'm very hopeful and proud of the work that's been done, and I applaud the mayor's office, TJ, his staff, and of course my colleagues, and you should very shortly, I imagine within the next couple of days, shouldn't be that difficult for TJ to get that draft copy to you. So, thank you.
All right, all in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any other reports of committee? Seeing none, item number 1, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 1 is the October Revenues versus Expenditures Report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight we have the October Revenue and Expenditure Report dated Represents 1/3 of the fiscal year, and revenue and expenditures are on track with budget and similar to last year's patterns. Councilor Allen also mentioned the FY 2017 free cash certification, and just for an update, the Comptroller's Office did submit the year-end checklist to the Department of Revenue on Thursday, November 30th. The process now takes approximately a month and a half. There's a review by the Springfield office, and then it's sent for a final review to Boston before we receive a final certification.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Items 2 and 3, Mr. Clerk.
Items 2 and 3 are reports and recommendations from the Board of Public Works. Item 2 is a petition to install electrical transmission facilities in the vicinity of Green Street from Eversource. Item number 3 is a petition to install fiber optic conduit at 121 Pinevale Street from Comcast. The recommendation is to approve both items.
Good evening.
Good evening, councilors. The two petitions that are in front of you, the one for Green Street is for a new facility that is being built at the corner of Green Street and Hancock Street. Pinevale Street is for the Wellspring Harvest greenhouse that is being constructed up off of Pinevale Street, and essentially installing conduits in the street to service both of those new facilities.
Any questions from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of the petition, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 4, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 4 is the Van Horn Dam Grant in the amount of $1,313,383.97.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Lindsay Hackett, Budget Director, Tamarack Drive in Springfield. This grant is actually an increase from a state grant for $1 million that we got for the repair to Van Horn Dam. It's an increase of $300,000 for some repairs that were not found in the beginning.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the grant, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Item number 5 is the Governor's Highway Traffic Enforcement Grant in the amount of $112,000.
Good evening, councilors. This is a grant from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, the Highway Safety Division. It's a $112,000 traffic enforcement and equipment grant. The grant supports traffic enforcement, mobilizations, and some equipment that will deploy into the community.
Any questions from the council? All in favor of accepting the grant, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is a $75 donation to the fire department.
All in favor of accepting the grant, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Item number 7 is an order to pay a bill of a prior year for various departments. Just as an FYI to the council, the number is listed as $31,615.85. Since the agenda was published, the Finance Department has updated their number, and the new number is $32,076.40. At the appropriate time, any counselor can make a motion to make the amendment on the record.
Good evening.
Hi, thank you, Mr. President. This order is to pay some previous year's bills using FY18's budget.
Is there any discussion? Is there a motion for the amended amount? Motion made by Councilor Edwards, seconded by Councilor Gomez. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. All in favor of accepting the grant, say aye. Aye. Gotcha. All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On approving the order, Councilor Edwards. Yes. Yes, Councilor Allen. Yes. Yes, Councilor Rook. Yes. Yes, Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Walsh. Yes. Yes, Councilor Marcus Williams. Yes. Yes, Councilor Ash. Yes. Yes, Councilor Twigs. Yes. Yes, Counselor Shay. Yes, Counselor Fenton. Yes, Counsel.
Right now. Would the clerk please recognize Counselor seat number 11?
Counselor Hurst. Counselor Hurst. Counselor Bud Williams. Counselor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved.
Item number 8 is an order for a budget transfer across departments in the amount of $35,000.
Thank you. This order is a budget transfer to transfer $35,000 out of our reserve for contingency line into the law department professional services for an increase for expert witnesses costs with litigation.
Any discussion? All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the order, Counselor Edwards. Yes, Counselor Allen. Yes, Counselor Rook. Yes, Counselor Gomez. Yes, Counselor Walsh. Yes, Counselor Marcus Williams. Yes, Counselor Ash. Yes, Counselor Twigs. Yes, Counselor Shay.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Hurst. Yes, Counselor Bud Williams. Yes, Counselor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved.
The next item is an amendment to Chapter 322, the Throwing Snow and Ice into Streets Ordinance. This item is on for second and third step.
Good evening, councilors. At our last meeting, first step was voted on, and just to remind the councilors, we are trying to attempt to do three things with a modification of the ordinance. Make the language much clearer as to what the violation is for throwing snow into the public way. Number two, it will allow the DPW along with the police department to issue fines through an ordinance violation. And number three, it's a fine set up that the first time in a fiscal year, the fine is $100, second fine is $200, third fine and on is $300, and we will be issuing fines the similar way that the building and code department do when there is a code violation at a property. We will be able to do it that way. What we plan on doing in the DPW is when we are out doing our inspections to notify these vendors of their violation, give them the opportunity to clear the area up before we would issue any sort of violation. So once this is passed, we would be handing out flyers to a lot of the plow contractors. As was discussed at the meeting, the intent here is not to go after residential properties where people are just shoveling snow and it happens to go into the street, or they're using their snow blower. What we are really trying to get rid of are the major commercial developments in the city that decide that it's okay just to plow snow into the public way with the hope that the city will pick it up somewhere along the way. Where we run into problems, Sumner Avenue, State Street, Boston Road, Parker Street, those are the major areas, Carew Street in the city. Those are the areas where we will be focusing our attention in the city.
Any questions or comments from the council? All right, this is on for second and third step this evening under Rule 22C. If we invoke Rule 22C, we will be able to take up this matter in one vote. All in favor of invoking Rule 22C, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On ordaining the ordinance, Councilor Edwards. Yes, Councilor Allen.
Are we just voting on the ordinance language or on the timing as well?
I'm sorry, the ordinance, if you vote yes on the ordinance, it will go into effect 20 days from now. I have to look at the...
So we're doing both things. We're doing the ordinance and the timing of the ordinance at the same time.
Yes, the ordinance will be ordained tonight. Correct.
Okay, yes.
Yes, Councilor Rook. Yes, Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Walsh. Yes, Councilor Marcus Williams. Yes, Councilor Ash. Yes, Councilor Twigs. Yes, Councilor Shay.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Bud Williams.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ramos.
No, more than sufficient. Ordinance is approved.
The next item is an amendment to Chapter 385, the parking ban violation. This is on for first step.
Good evening, councilors. As you remember, back in the spring, there was some discussion with regard to the fines that the city issues for vehicles that are illegally parked during snowstorms. We came to the council, I believe, in either April or May. Excuse me, it was sent to the committee, and since then we've met at the committee level, I believe 4 or 5 times to discuss this item. At the last committee meeting, there was some agreement on what the fine should be, but since then the time had gone too far to bring it back to the council, so it's coming back to you for your first vote tonight. Over the last few weeks, we've exchanged a lot of information. What we've determined is that there are kind of 2 different violations that are out there the police can issue. One of them is a $50 ticket that is in the ordinance right now. There is also a $15 ticket that can be issued, and there is some slight language that allows them to kind of write one or the other. Historically, during a snowstorm, when we are plowing and the tickets are written, they have been for $15. The only time that a $50 ticket has been written is when we have been doing major snow removal or areas that we've been blanketing specifically for towing. So what we are looking for at this point is the language change that allows both of those tickets to be $50 at this point for both tickets. As just a point of order moving forward, the Traffic Commission is doing some modification to the overall rules of the road in the city that this is going to be slightly discussed at, and basically take those 2 items that I were discussing and bring it into one. That wouldn't be coming before you until February probably, so we wanted to get the fines taken care of. And at the subcommittee meeting, general government subcommittee meeting, we had the parking authority who issues tickets. We had the police department, the DPW, and obviously the counselors there. So if any counselors have any questions, or if Councilor Hurst would like to add anything to that.
Councilor Hurst.
I just want to say, I was originally not in favor of raising the fee, just because I was under the impression that it was $15. And so when the research was done, and it was very clear that in the ordinance that the fee was $50, and there was some ambiguity between the police department and the rules and regulations they were following versus the ordinance that we had on the books, I thought it made sense to get some clarity and also to enforce what we already had on the books, which was a $50 fee for those that are in violation. So I'm in favor of this. The only thing that I would ask of you, Chris, is to make sure that people are informed and that people are notified in every avenue that you can possibly do so. And I think people are going to believe that there still is a $15 fine. And so it seems to me that we want to make sure that people are on notice that we are going to enforce the ordinance that we already had on the books, and that it's going to be $50 from this point forward.
Absolutely. One of the things that I would like to do, councilors, is with both ordinances, the previous one that we voted on and this one, is obviously to go through what we can with the press and any other agency that we can get the information out on within the next couple weeks, and we can do that through Mass Live and through all of our notifications that we need to do. So I'm happy to do that.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Several months ago, I introduced this proposed change to the ordinance with a fine for $100. We've spent a lot of time in committee, and under Councilor Hurst's leadership, we've been able to come up with the research that was necessary to realize that the fee has actually been $50 all along, and what the police department needed was clarity that the $15 tickets should not be issued in those circumstances. I want to thank Councilor Hurst for conducting all those meetings over a subject that I'm sure he wasn't too thrilled to be conducting meetings over. It was an issue that came up in a neighborhood council meeting, and I can appreciate that when I get an idea in my head, sometimes I can't be the easiest to deal with. So I do appreciate that. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for his patience and stewardship, and I'm hopeful we can pass it tonight. So with that, I'm going to ask for one other thing. We have a snowstorm coming up this Saturday, and allegedly, according to the Doppler forecast of our local weathermen and women.
Even weather when you look at it.
So, accordingly, my concern is that the police department's of the opinion that they are bound in certain circumstances to write the tickets for $15. There's agreement that should be a uniform $50 fee across the board. What I'm trying to avoid is a snowstorm this weekend or shortly thereafter, and we're issuing some tickets for $15, some for $50, and then when we take final passage of this 2 weeks from now, that we'd be changing it to a uniform 50 across the board. So what I'm going to make a motion, Mr. President, is that we invoke Rule 22E, which is passage in an emergency, and the emergency being the snow, and that we pass this ordinance in one vote instead of the ordinary 2 separate meetings and 3 steps, so that for all snowstorms for this season, the tickets will be $50 for a parking violation. So I'd like to do that in the form of a motion that we invoke Rule 22E and declare it an emergency.
Motion made by Councilor Fenton, seconded by Councilor Twiggs. Councilor Williams on the motion.
I had still a couple questions for Mr. Signoli.
Roll call.
Oh, how are you?
On the motion. Councilor Williams, Councilor Fenton has made a motion to invoke Rule 22E, and so we can continue discussion on the matter after
Okay,
the vote.
all right, good enough.
This requires 2/3 vote. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Just, when does, okay,
The motion is to invoke Rule 22E to vote in one single vote.
when does the legislation take place after it's invoked tonight, if that's possible? Does it take place immediately? 30 days from now, 60 days from now?
Councilor Fenton.
It would be immediate.
I don't,
In order for it to take passage immediately, it would have to be, in order for it to become, assuming that the motion passes and the ordinance goes through all 3 steps tonight, in order for it to take effect immediately, the ordinance would have to be amended to include a line saying that this will go into effect as soon as passed. Right now, there is no such language in the proposed amendment, and therefore, under the city charter, it would go into effect 20 days or 21 days after the mayor signed the ordinance.
Councilor Fenton.
There's already a motion on the floor. No.
Motion is withdrawn.
I make a motion that we insert provision that this ordinance takes effect immediately.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
second.
Seconded by Councilor Rook. Councilor Walsh on the
Well,
motion.
what if it doesn't snow? And then, Merry Christmas to our constituents. All your fees are going up. We're raising fees. I think you need more time for people to know that they're going to have to pay more money. I think there needs to be more education to people who might be in violation of the ban, and that was one of the things I was going to ask you. Are you going to be giving people in different neighborhoods an opportunity to move the car before they're ticketed?
They are always given the opportunity to move their car. Always.
Because we all, I mean, it's December, it hasn't snowed, so we probably don't all remember all the calls that we got after some of the snowstorms and issues that arose when it actually did snow. So there hasn't really been a lot of citizen input on this. So I think we should give people the opportunity to know, especially at Christmas time, that they're going to be paying more money if they're in violation of something. So I'm going to vote against it.
Councilor Williams on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also agree.
Can I have some water?
Councilor Walsh, with respect to Councilor Fitton's motion, I agree that we need some additional time to inform our constituents about this. As much as I love the last thing I want to hear about is on that Sunday that they got $50 tickets all over the place from Pine Point to 16 Acres. So I would also mention that again, we need increased time, as well as just the due diligence on our part to inform those who do not know. So I will be voting no on this as well.
Because your phone will be ringing off.
Councilor Allen on the motion.
Yeah, on the motion, we talked about this in the committee, and I told Councilor Fenton, I believe I told you in the committee that I wasn't in favor of it. But here's my rationale, is that we just had hearings on a $2 increase in the trash fee, for bulk items. And we just earlier in this meeting talked about the timing of a public hearing for another chance to get public input. So I just think it's kind of rash. As much as I'd like to get the $50 on the books and stuff, the only impact, there's no impact to the plowing. It's just the fine. If somebody gets a fine, the plowing will still be done this weekend if it's necessary to do it, just as well as it's always done. But the impact of the money, I think it's better to tell people, to give people a couple weeks and to vote it again like we normally do.
Anyone else on the motion? Councilor Hurst.
I just want to be clear that the $50 fee is already on the books. So the $50 fee is already on the books. So if the cops choose to write a $50 ticket, then it's on them. And so we're not changing anything from that standpoint. And so, I'm not so sure that the timing matters as much as opposed to the enforcement.
Councilor Fenton.
Yeah, I'll yield.
Councilor Allen.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Hurst. There was some confusion in the meeting, in the general government meeting, about $15 versus $50. There was one thing that was said, that the $50 fine has been on the books since 2004, for 13 years. Well, almost all of us have been here during that time. And my only point is, whether it's been on the books or not, it's legit or not, that doesn't address the issue of public knowledge, of which is public awareness, and that's really what I'm saying. So,
Councilor Gomez, then Councilor Fenton.
Thank you. From my understanding is that the $50 fine is for impeding snow removal. So the violation of the $15 is up to the discretion of an SPA or the officer or ordinance officer that's giving the ticket at the time, which the violation at $15, which, let's not forget, last year what it was people weren't moving their cars. The biggest issue at hand is the tow part of it. And we're not even, this is not talking about the towing part. What we really need to focus on is moving these cars out of the way. And if we don't start good practice now, we're going to pay. We're going to if we do accept this in a month or so, whenever it is that we do, that the fact is that if it snows or it doesn't snow, we still are letting winter come and not having this enforced when winter is here. The winter comes in a couple more days, and 20 more days. If you don't want to, I would say if you wanted to wait for it, but I strongly suggest not. Most of these fines are going to be given around people with buildings. The ones that have wards, you guys don't have buildings. It's parking, it's a violation when the light comes on, if it's on the right side or the left side. And then in 24 hours, it's up to the discretion of the officer to give the $50 fine, which has already been in the books. The only thing what we're trying to do is to encourage people not to pay the $50 and get 15, because then what you're doing is you're going to let them get a $15 fine. They're going to say, hey, it's just a $15 fine, and then the next day they're going to get $50. Essentially, when you could just give them the $50 fine and make them move it right then and there. Because I know constituents and people regularly would just say, it's just $15, I'm going to let it go. But automatically, good practice, if you follow through and you hold people accountable and tell them $50 right off, I'm going to get the heat. I understand there's difficult decisions that we want to make. We're not necessarily raising fees. We're just enforcing a law that's already been in the books. And honestly, I deal with the poorest district in the city, and I understand the problem. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't move these cars and we don't start with good practice, we're going to end up in a pickle like we did last year. And I believe it's something stronger that we should support. I understand when with information you want to get it out to our constituency. But the fact of the matter is, that's why we have the news, that's why you have people of the public here that's going to put this stuff out there. I think it's important that we enforce this protocol, so then there's no problem with SPA, because Springfield Parking Authority and SPD, that's the issue here, that they're all issuing tickets wildly when there's confusion. We have to get everybody on the same page when it comes to our systems that are already with these laws that have been in place. I'm totally understand completely that $35, but the problem is now you leave it to the discretion of the officer or the person on the street, if the neighbor got 15, the neighbor got 50. Regardless of the fact, I think it should be clear across the board that $50 should be put into place, and it should go into order before. Let's say it does snow, but what happens when it does? And we don't know from the weather from here to here. I remember back in the day, Tom Pavacqua couldn't get it straight. So everybody thinks it's going to snow. Apple iPhone is telling us it's not, but tomorrow it can change. And realistically, I don't think we got time to be wasting.
All right, there's a motion on the floor, and Councilor Fenton wanted to respond. I'll give you the floor, Councilor Fenton. No, Councilor Shea.
Okay. I think that the debate we're having here over the 15 or the 50 is moot because the statute is it's $50. So we don't have an option here to decide to charge 15. We've been charging 15 by error, but the council would have to pass regulations here tonight, changing it from 50 back to 15, and then we'd have to change it. So we don't have the authority here tonight legally to go with the 15. It's $50 on the books. That's what has to be written. Plain and simple.
Councilor Fenton.
Councilor, if I may just explain, there is a $15 fine on the books. It's right now what we are trying to do is eliminate the confusion of the police department to be able to write the $15 ticket. Because basically what they do is there's two types. The way that it's written is very, I don't want to use the word vague, but they don't, it's kind of both written the same way, so they have the option of picking one or the other, and in most cases they pick the 15. Only time they ever pick the 50 is when they actually know that they're going to tow that vehicle. So right now what we are asking for is that language to be modified as to whether a vehicle is towed or untowed to make it $50 so that that ambiguity is gone in the ticket writing procedure.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to clarify a couple of points. What Chris just said about the 15 being on the books and the 50 being on the books was not my experience from what I found in my research, and I don't believe that's what I heard Attorney Davis report. What is happening is that the police officers have a ticket book, and the ticket book says that one of their options is to write the ticket for $15. I haven't seen any municipal ordinance that says that that's the fine. I have seen the citation to the $50 amount. And so what we're trying to do is just clarify that it's one fee, it's $50, and that's the amount. That's the first point. The second point is regarding the urgency. The question, and I appreciate the comments about wanting to wait and give people additional time to have input, although we have been meeting on it since last April. I would like to point out that the question should be framed in the following way. Either we want to wait to give public input, and we're okay with the fact that some tickets this year will go out for $15 and others will go out for $50, or we're not. And if we're okay with that snow season changeover, parking the car in the exact same space on the exact same street with the exact same violation in the month of December 2017 could cost you $15, but 2 weeks later, that same car in the same place in the same type of snowstorm is going to cost you $50. So my policy preference is that we not have that situation, that it's one season, it's $50, that's it, from the beginning of the snow till the end. That's the reason for the urgency. If folks feel that that distinction isn't worth making, and that instead it's worth having an additional 2 weeks with the risk that people get tickets for different amounts for the same offense, then vote my amendment down. But I think the issue's understood. I stand by the amendment. I don't know if there was a second, but the first amendment is that it take effect upon passage.
Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just very briefly, I think in regards to allowing more time, I don't think it was to solicit input. I think it was merely to allow for public notice, and I think those are two very different things. There's going to be no discussion or debate on whether the $50 is legitimate. It is legitimate. It is what's on the books. But to Chris's point, he just mentioned that fines have been given for $15 before, fines have been given for $50 before, and I think the residents deserve an opportunity to learn that if they have received a $15 ticket in the past, then that is changing to $50, and that's merely where I'm coming from.
Councilor Walsh.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I think something else has to be clarified. I don't know if you or your constituents have this issue, but no one ever seems to know what side of the road they're supposed to be on, which may be one of the reasons people have trouble with the cars. I don't know how much information is given out. It always says parking bans are in effect, and then people want to know, well, which side of the street am I supposed to be on? I don't think there's enough clarification.
Every time we put the parking ban out, we put the full parking ban that tells people what side of the street they are either allowed to park on or not allowed to park on. When we put it out this year, we're going to do it both ways. We're going to say, this is the side you park on, this is the side you don't park on. Every time we put it out, sometimes when you'll see it, in a scroll on, channel 22 or 40 or something like that, it will just say parking ban in effect.
Exactly.
However, in the detail that we put out, always has all of that information on it.
Yeah.
Always.
Because I do think people don't always know which side of the street.
And it's never different. We never change it based upon the day or the type of event. It's always the same.
They may think they're legally parked, and then they get a surprise $50 note, love note.
Councilor Williams on a motion?
Just a quick question, Chris.
Yes.
I never know what side.
When the parking ban goes into effect, it's enforced, then it doesn't snow. Is the parking ban still enforced?
Most likely, no. And the way that we do that is, number one, we always attempt to give a minimum of 12 hours notice that there will be a parking ban. We will never, we will say today at 10 o'clock in the morning that the parking ban will go into effect, at some point in time. We never give it a full, we're not giving them a 1 or 2 hour notice. When the parking ban goes into effect, we attempt to make the parking ban start before it snows.
Right.
So that, especially at night, when it's 7 o'clock, if you're going to bed and it's going to snow overnight, we want to make sure those cars are moved. Our parking enforcement from a ticketing and towing operation does not start until it actually snows. Okay. So if it doesn't snow, we coordinate with the parking authority and with the police department to get out there. We do not start ticketing and towing, if it doesn't snow. We never do that.
And just to Councilman Gomez's point in terms of the towing, so once the car is ticketed, then what happens? They still have an opportunity to move it, or do you give them an hour, or?
When the police blanket an area, they have lights on, they have bullhorns, they visit homes. If cars are ticketed, we then are following up in that neighborhood with a towing operation at the same time. So somebody could get a ticket and not get towed, whereas the car behind them could get ticketed and towed simply because somebody got out there and was able to move their car. A ticket, only takes a few minutes really to write in comparison to a towing operation, which may take 15 or 20 minutes to tow a particular car based upon the type of car, the way that it's parked, being able to get a truck in there, how much snow. So we end up doing a lot more tickets than we do towing. And that information I know we provided at one of the previous meetings.
So even though they get the ticket, they still have the opportunity to move the vehicle?
Yeah, before there's a tow.
CJ will be down there like in 2 seconds trying to put a hook on it.
No.
And then it's $100 on top of the 50 and storage and all that.
On average, I may be wrong on the numbers, during a typical snowstorm, we may issue, say, 250 tickets, which really in my terms isn't a lot, but we may only tow 20 or 30 cars.
Okay. My last question, are you comfortable enough with us passing this tonight on the spot, irregardless of more public notice in terms of the 15 going to 50?
Well, the public notice side of it, we have probably had a half dozen, 8 meetings since the beginning of the year, so they've all been posted, they've all been discussions.
That's not
So,
that's
you know,
not, no, that's not the
I am also not a big fan to go out to a public hearing to get public input on a violation.
No, that's not my question.
If you're breaking the law, you should be paying
Chris,
for breaking the law.
That's not my question about more public input.
Yeah.
People still have the right to know. That's all I'm
Yep.
saying. And having 8 city council subcommittee meetings doesn't notify 155,000 people in the city of Springfield. That's my only point.
Yep.
Has it been on 22 as a public service announcement? That's, what do you plan to do? To say, hey,
Immediately
look,
upon passage, I'm going to blanket whatever I can blanket in any of the media outlets to let them know that both of these items that we hopefully pass tonight are going to be enacted.
Yeah, because I agree with Councilor Hurst. The 50 is already on the books. I think that's very important to qualify. This is not increasing, because the first thing is going to
That's a change
read,
of
council
practice.
increases parking to $50, from 15 to 50. Hey, that's a public relations nightmare.
Absolutely.
Because I know, like Gomez, you say, hey, Eastern Avenue, Westford, State Street, Henry.
Exactly.
You know, we deal with this, and people don't move their cars. We understand that. They just don't move their cars. On Quincy Street, they park.
Yep.
They might not ever move their cars. But hey, it's because the emergency vehicles can't come down the street.
Well, the
You
answer
can't
is
get in
no
there. The
snow.
plows can't come in there. It creates havoc in some of these communities.
No snow, that's the answer.
Councilor Ash.
President Chris, I think there also has to be clarity to the police department to let them know that the officers don't have that option anymore. Whether it's 15, it's 50. And so there has to be some clarity from
Right,
the
that's-
brass to,
Right.
whether it's in the roll call or whatever, that this is the new
Yes.
policy, and it's not to be.
Sergeant Kwitowski, head of traffic, was at our meeting tonight, so we discussed it there, and that's one of the things that obviously we go right back to them and make sure that they write the tickets the correct way.
Councilor Gomez.
I just had a question, Mr. President. We're just on the motion, because he took back the
Yep.
invoking 22E.
There's a motion on the floor. Mr. Clerk, would you like to
The
clarify the
motion
motion?
is to, so it can be,
So just so that the council is clear, when the council passes an ordinance through all of its 3 steps, there's then a 3-day period, I believe I might have the number wrong, but it's about a 3-day period where the mayor has the opportunity to sign the ordinance into law, to not sign it, let it become a law after the 3 days have elapsed, or to veto the ordinance, okay? Under the city charter, 20 days after the mayor has signed an ordinance, it then goes into effect. So with the amendment that Councilor Fenton has proposed is that as soon as this ordinance gets its mayoral approval, it automatically goes into effect.
no, because I think he made me an amendment to the language, and then he retracted his amendment. So you're talking about if he was to make the next proposal to invoke 22E on the mayoral approval for 30 days.
So there are 2 different motions. One of them was taken back. The first motion was to invoke Rule 22E in the
Right, I
City Council
understand that
rules.
one. I'm talking about the second one, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that was the one that was taken back, right? And the one that is currently before the council is
Right now.
to add the language that says that once the ordinance receives mayoral approval, whenever it goes through its 3 steps, that it then automatically, that it becomes effective on that date.
Oh, so he doesn't, so realistically, 22E is not in effect, it's just on mayoral approval, and that's where we're at right now.
That is the ordinance before the body now.
Clear?
Just for purposes of clarity, if this motion passes, my next one will be to invoke Rule 22E.
All right, that's exactly what I was getting at. I just wanted to make sure you were stating that, I appreciate it.
Councilor Edwards.
I appreciate my colleagues' concerns about getting in notice and making sure people are aware of this. The simple solution to this problem is just follow the law. The ordinance, regardless whether it's a $15 or a $50 fine. Let's think about who suffers when you don't remove your snow. Just like you get the calls, and will get calls because people do not park appropriately, you're also going to get the calls of those of us who have family members who are in need of an ambulance, or just the anxiety of the possible need of an ambulance when their neighbor did not respect the law and move their car like it was supposed to. I believe that this is a big deal. It's not as big as probably setting of the tax rate and many the other things that come before the council. But this is a big enough deal where it should be either on the first page or one of the front page or one of the sections of the paper tomorrow, the Republican. I'm sure that it's going to be all over social media by the time this before the end of the night, and it's going to start a talk. There are other newspapers around the city, and I would hope that the city would reach out to them to make notices, whether they're monthlies, whether they're weeklies, whatever they are. But this is something that's going to start a conversation, and the sooner we get it passed, the sooner we can start the conversation that it's coming before the storm starts. Even if the storm is this weekend, fine, it'll be there, but we would have had 2 or 3 days of people complaining about the fact that the storm, that we raised the fee. Even if we didn't raise the fee, we're just enforcing the original fee. But if the storm doesn't come, it also adds on the impetus for us to get something done. So the idea, we will never be able to create a mechanism as a council that we want to get public input and everybody's just going to know it's coming. Some people are not going to read the paper. Some people are not going to be listening to WTCC. Some won't listen to WMAS. Some won't read the point of view. Whatever it is, there is no perfect mechanism to make everybody aware. But there is this thing in the laws talked about the ignorance of the law is not an excuse. The fact of the matter is that when there's a parking storm or there's a storm and and you're in violation, if you park wrong, you have to pay. But who suffers when they do not do the right thing? It's their neighbors. And I don't care whether it's Quincy Street or any other street in the city, the majority of the people on a street are doing the right thing. And we're spending all this energy talking about those few idiots who will not do the right thing regardless of what the fee is. Some people will leave the car out there even when it is a $50 fine because they just would prefer to do that than to have to put clothes on, boots on, and go move the car and then try to come back in the house and disrupt their sleep. Let's think about some of the discretionary funds that are available to some of us, even though we may live in one of the poor cities in the Commonwealth. There are plenty of people who will pay you $50 just to leave them alone and will pay the fine, which is better than having to go outside. So I'm in support of the urgency of this passing. I'm in support of the $50, and I would hope that we would not waste as much energy as we do on the people who don't do the right thing anyway.
You move the question?
Second.
Well, there's a motion on the floor, and the motion is to for this ordinance to take effect as soon as it is passed. Correct, Mr. Clerk?
The motion is to have the ordinance take effect upon mayoral approval.
Upon mayoral approval, okay. All right, is there any further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On amending the ordinance to add a section stating that the ordinance will take effect upon mayoral approval. A yes vote is for the amendment, a no vote is against the amendment. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen?
No.
No. Councilor Rook?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh?
No.
No. Councilor Marcus Williams?
No.
No. Councilor Ash? Yes. Councilor Twigs?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Shea?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Bud Williams? No. Councilor Ramos?
No.
Sufficient.
More than sufficient. Amendment is approved. Councilor Fenton.
Okay, make a motion that we enact Rule 22E.
Motion made by Councilor Fenton, seconded by Councilor Ash.
All right, so just, again, for the council's edification, Rule 22B states that no ordinance shall be passed finally on the date on which it is introduced, except in cases of special emergency involving the health or safety of the people or their property. Section 22E states, no ordinance shall be regarded as an emergency measure unless it is defined in a preamble thereto, separately voted upon and receiving an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the members of the council. So that's 9 members of the council. The preamble in this case is going to be Councilor Fenton explained that he believes there's a snowstorm coming this weekend and that is a significant enough emergency. So that's the language that the council is voting upon to insert as a preamble to the ordinance so that it can pass as an emergency measure in one session, in the session that it was introduced.
Thank you.
9. On the preamble, Councilor Edwards.
Hold on. So could you, just for clarification, could you just say what a yes vote means and what a no vote means on this?
A yes vote would be to add a preamble to the ordinance stating that this is in anticipation of the emergency snowstorm that will occur in the next several days on this up-and-coming weekend, so that the council can pass this ordinance in one step tonight.
And how does that differ from what we just voted on?
What you just voted on, that item had already passed first step at a previous meeting, and this is its subsequent meeting, and you, rather than taking two steps, you just passed it in one step.
We just passed the second step?
You passed second and third step in one vote.
We just did that?
On the previous ordinance.
On the previous, okay.
Correct.
So this is, if we vote yes or no on this, what does it mean?
If you vote no, to speak in the negative, if you voted no on this, then it has to go through all three steps. Assuming that someone didn't at some later point invoke Rule 22C.
Thank you.
To take one vote.
Councilor Walsh.
I don't know how much snow is predicted for this weekend, but I don't know if the possibility of a snowstorm really fits the definition of what an emergency is.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to invoke Rule 22E. If there's no further discussion, roll call.
On the motion, Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
No.
No. Councilor Rook.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
No.
No. Councilor Marcus Williams.
No.
No. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twigs. Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Bud Williams. No. Councilor Ramos.
No.
It's 8 in favor and 5 against. The motion fails.
Motion fails. Is there any further discussion?
Of course, if we have a nor'easter, we're going to be in big trouble. Let's hope it's just a dusting.
Mr. President, I move the question.
Yeah, so, Chris, how much
All right, so this is on for first
Now you
step.
can't do anything until the middle of
This
January.
is on for first step this evening. First step is voice vote required. Correct, Mr. Clerk? Correct. All right, all in favor of first step, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No?
That's
More
already
than sufficient.
passed.
First step is approved.
The last item on tonight's agenda is a resolution sponsored by Councilor Twigs, Williams, Hurst, Fenton, and Walsh. This resolution is the polling place activities resolution.
Councilor Twigs.
With your permission, I'd like to sit.
Sure.
City of Springfield, City Council meeting for 2017. Whereas the Massachusetts General Laws have specific rules and regulations pertaining to activities at polling place. Whereas Chapter 54, Section 65 states that no other poster, card, handbill, placard, pictures, or circular intended to influence the action of the voter shall be posted, exhibited, circulated, or distributed in the polling place, in the building where the polling place is located, on the walls thereof, on the premise of which the building stands, or within 150 feet of the building entrance door to such polling place. And whereas 150 feet of the building entrance door seem a bit extreme, now therefore be it resolved that the Springfield City Council support a change in the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 54, Section 65, to read, no other poster, card, handbill, placard, picture, or circular intended to influence the action of the voter shall be posted, exhibited, circulated, or distributed in the polling place, in the building where the polling is located, on the walls thereof, and on the premise on which the building stands are within 50 feet of the building entrance door to such a polling place. Mr. President, we are offering this resolution in hopes that the legislators would see the wiseness and support of such an amendment. I could have come before you indicating that I would file action that my constitutional right of being denied for free speech with this amendment. And I've had several conversations with attorneys who indicated that I can do that. Now, 50 feet is, I don't think there should be any feet, quite frankly. But we put 50 in there so that we have a number to work with. Now here is the real dichotomy of this problem. 40 years ago, many of you weren't even born. But there were 2 and 3, 4 people for each candidate at the polling place. We used to have a lot of fun, you know, when they bring out the voting lists and they say, oh, certain people on your street hasn't voted. Well, people are walking at the polls, they call them right up, say, hey, get down here. That increased the number of people that voted. Now, we can hardly get people to work at the polls for us. Candidates are working the polls themselves. And if I'm 150 feet away, is how we have to go about it. Now, even more difficult, people, particularly in poor neighborhoods, they need a picture or the name of the person they're going to vote for. Many of them can't spell the names of the people they're going in to vote for. So we give them a little handout, say, hey, pull level 4, in this case, vote for me. See my picture right here, and that's my name right there. So when they go into the little booth, they can find my name on there to vote for me. But what happens? The policemen in the polling place, they treat them like criminals when they come through the door with somebody's hand out. Hey, what you do with that paper? Throw that paper away. You can't bring that in the polling place. What the heck? You need that to aid you in voting. And so I say to you that I'm offering this resolution so that we can get some amendments. I'm sure you have some strong feelings about people who work at the polls for you, and they shouldn't be treated like enemies. People going into the polls, I went in with Barack Obama's cap. You know he's not on the ballot. You can't come in there with that cap. Take that cap off. Well, of course, I took it off. I didn't have any problems. But that intimidates voters. And we should do everything that we can to not intimidate the voter. Now, if a voter came in and had a sweater on, and he had to take the sweater off and go back home, more than likely that voter is not coming back. So what's the big deal if the person's name is not on the ballot? Why can't he go into a voting place with somebody else's name on it? Why? I don't see what difference it makes. I want the legislature to tell me why it makes a big difference. And so without talking forever, I offer this resolution for our consideration.
Councilor Edwards, then Councilor Ash.
I'm not going to vote against this, but I think my colleague blended a whole lot of different things together. What we're talking about is the distance, and part of going to vote is the sanctity of the voting booth, and the reason for the distance is to allow for people to get to the door of the voting poll without being harassed. And the thing is most people, I can't say mathematically how many people have already made up their mind and how many people actually make up their mind in the polling place itself. But many of the things that he mentioned got nothing to do with is 50 feet or 250 feet, whether you're bringing literature in or not, or how polite the police and the enforcement of these things, because it does matter what neighborhood and what poll you're at and who is covering the poll, whether or not these laws are enforced. But the purpose of the distance is allow for you to be able to get to the door without being harassed by multiple people. And the sanctity of the voting booth, regardless of what I may say to somebody walking into the door, no matter how many people are standing outside who have somebody's placard handing it to me or the thing, and they can be yelling all they want, and if they're foolish enough to think just because I'm nodding my head saying, yep, you got my vote, don't mean that when I go in to poll my vote that they got my vote. But the distance is on. What I thought this was about was strictly about the distance. It wasn't about anything other than the amount of distance. And let us just be reminded the distance was in place for the purposes of harassment, addressing the issue around harassing people trying to get to the poll to vote.
Councilor Ash.
I'm happy to support Councilor Twiggs' resolve. And you're right, Henry, that the interest over the last 10, 20, 30 years at the polls is a whole lot different today than it was. There just isn't a whole lot of enthusiasm and people really gearing up for the day like they used to be. I think this, is what Henry's getting at a little bit. But I think also a part of this and related to it, I think from a city standpoint is I think we need some more uniformity in terms of how we're enforcing some of the other issues related to this. Like, for example, some polling places will allow a candidate to put a sign up, even if they're not going to have somebody standing there all day, where it's left alone. Other places, the custodians will come out and take the sign and throw it away or do something with it and all that, which is fine if there's a standard of the rules. Right now, there is no standard. It's just some places do it this way, some places do it another way. Some parts of the city allow for larger signs and that can be hung on walls, and some don't. So I think there needs to be some uniformity as far as that's concerned too. But I think as it relates to this resolve, Henry's right. There's got to do something to try to to engage the voters a little bit and have that interaction to some extent when somebody's going into voting, because we're seeing over the last 10 years people are losing interest. Whether or not this addresses that to a great deal or not, probably not. But there's got to be doing something to get a little enthusiasm back into the whole idea of going to vote.
Councilor Walsh.
Yes, I'm happy to support my colleague, Councilor Twiggs. We had this discussion after the election. What really annoys me, Councilor Ash referred to it, is when you have a sign at the polls, and maybe your poll workers are not going to be there within the next half hour, they take your signs away. I don't know what they do with them, but they take the signs away. And I think we also should look at allowing the signs to be there when people are not there. Because it could be 10 to 15 minutes, it could be an hour.
I know.
It creates, as Councilor Twiggs referred to,
I give you a ticket for the egg dog party, man.
atmosphere at the polls, and people get upset when the sign's taken away or when they're yelled at when they go into certain polling places if they haven't been exactly 150 feet away. And I also agree with this low voter turnout of 90%, that if there's anything we can do that will improve voter turnout, we should try to do it.
Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to Councilor Edwards' point, I can certainly understand, protecting the sanctity of polling locations. But in terms of polling locations, I think of Site Tech as like a prime example where if this was to actually become the law of the land, the 50 feet really doesn't infringe on anyone's ability to get to the door. Or I think it encourages, if this were to pass, I think it actually encourages people more participation, just because voters, candidates can actually get to the voters before they enter. So I actually stand to support this resolution, and I think it's actually a good idea. I don't know how much, leverage it will have down the road, but I think it's a step in the right direction. And I also still stand firm that polling location should not be named after candidates running for office. Thank you.
Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. Could I just ask you, Councilor Twiggs, through the President, is the only change the distance?
As this is laid out, Councilor Allen, I think there's been some good suggestions made tonight that can become a part of this.
But as you presented it tonight, I went through it word for word, and
yes.
Some of the words are arranged a little differently, but all I could pick up was the distance was the only change.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Ash.
To clarify, I don't want to dilute Councilor Twiggs' resolve. I think the other items, at least that I brought up, and Councilor Walsh spoke of, I think we can look at apart from this resolve, but I think they're important to address. But I think that we can do that probably as a separate approach to this resolve.
Mr. President, I would like to just note that this resolution will go to the general court, asking them to look at this chapter 54, section 65. Now, assume they does nothing with it. My conversation with the solicitor earlier today, he indicated that this council can ask the solicitor to draft a special act for consideration for Springfield. And home rule, and I'm not opposed to that. He said that if we were having any difficulty at all, because it has to go to the legislature, that we can pass a resolution asking the city solicitor to draft that home rule petition. Yeah.
Get more attention.
Yeah. It'll probably get more attention, as my good colleague Ash has indicated.
Any other comments from the council? Councilor Williams.
Just a question, President. Now, I know it's 150 feet. It was 50, then it was 100, then 150. With your research, Councilor Twigg, who determines who takes the sign up and at what point in time?
I don't know. But I know that the answer that we've received is that the election commissioner has informed them to enforce that.
Oh.
Now, as I read 54, chapter 54, I didn't see anything in there about signs on the premise.
Right.
And throwing away $10 signs.
Right. I think it's 150 feet, we know that.
Yes.
If it's 151 feet and you have a sign there,
yeah,
I don't think they have any authority to come and take that sign.
Well, they will take that sign if you're not standing there.
They've taken many of mine, trust me.
Yes, well, that's
I agree.
the question.
I thought you had, that's not in the legislation, that's not in the law.
No.
That's not an ordinance, legislation, or anything. So that's an administrative thing.
Yeah.
That's done. Oh, okay, because they take those things up in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, if
Katie, you said 30, in a matter of minutes those signs are gone, not hours, minutes.
The custodians that do it.
And they come out and take, I don't think they have any
there's a
authority to do it.
policeman where I went to the poll.
All right, any other comments from the council? Councilor Gomez.
I too have endured some of those things, and I was uncontested this year, and they took my signs, and it's frustrating, but at the same time, just to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, I'm in total support of fairness, but when it comes to being harassed at the poll, when I ran, You know, there was candidates that were hand in hand bringing people right into the poll. And there's laws in place so it can stop things like that. And enforcing or even alluding to change those type of laws that were in place to protect people is really taken away from the fun. It's really taken for the fact that people like Jesse Lederman that killed himself 2 years in a row, door knocked every single time. And people that actually put that work in. And, you know, I understand, you know, some people have been around for a long time and they have their base.
Well,
That's
I've been
fine.
around.
And I'm cool with it. Hand out your slates. Do what you got to do. But essentially, you know, I'm not here to burden. I think every resolution has its chance to pass. But on the flip side, we should always give everybody the fair amount of respect that's always been around. And you know, I guess there's another conversation when we get to the point when we want to start putting teeth and language into order. But for the most part, you know, I'm going to give my full support. But there's always two sides to the coin, and I think that depends on who the incumbent is or isn't. We can't feel that we own the poll either. You know, it's the people's poll. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Is there any further business before the council?
I have no further business.
Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. Just a quick one. Since Councilor Bud Williams questioned the timing of those tax meetings, I've been re-looking at the calendar and stuff and considering whether we could slot in another one. So the ones that I mentioned before will stay on the books, but I will try, Councilor Williams, if I could just ask you, what do you think the right time for a public hearing is?
Thank you, Councilman, for taking time and doing your due diligence. I remember when Councilor Rook used to hold these meetings, he would hold them like 6 o'clock. Seems to be a fair time. 6:30, it would be a fair time.
Whatever you call it, I'll try to make it happen. It would be Thursday night.
6 or 6:30, whatever.
6 or 6:30.
That seems to be a fair time.
So I'll have the council office look. I can make it at that time. I'll see if they can get a quorum, and we'll try to add another meeting in there.
Thank you, Councilman Allen, for understanding and trying to reach out to the citizens of this city, those who work and don't get out of work till like 4 or 5 o'clock. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.